Hey folks, just a heads up to say that between my internet connection and the Zoom, there are a few moments where the audio isn't the best. However, it's such a great conversation, couldn't be replicated. I felt like you'd want to hear it anyway, and I don't think it interferes with it for most of the recording, so enjoy. This episode of The Horror is dedicated to Richard Pyne, who we lost in December. My thoughts are with his family and with Dorian as well. Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of The Horror with Patrizia Dahlia Thompson. I am here with a guest who in many ways needs no introduction, but I'm going to wax his car for a moment and give him, the full fangirl. When I talk about Jörg Buttgereit, I think generally I am talking about a very small selection of his work, in all honesty. I'm talking about his 4 feature films. But Jörg has worked across different mediums for over 30 years now. You directed the first German production of Gabba Gabba Hey, the Ramones musical. Am I right?
Yes, but that was originally an Australian stage play.
I
So
mean,
we licensed it to Germany.
yeah, well, nonetheless, you've directed your own original plays for theatre. He created Captain Berlin. I've seen, the only play of yours I've seen is the one that's on the Arrow box set, the film version of Captain Berlin versus Hitler, which is great.
Mm.
Even in terms of Jorg's film work, he has directed for television, music videos, short films. His work runs the gamut. However, my love for Jorg's work primarily comes in the form of 4 of the most iconoclastic films to ever exist within the extreme horror space. Now, I know something that I want to talk to you about is I know that I will talk to you about your relation to kind of how you feel about your film's relation to the horror genre, particularly to the tag extreme horror, but 4 of the most iconoclastic kind of films and a real lasting legacy. It's for 4 feature films. It's a big legacy. You are like the Harper Lee of gore movies, and that you just kind of did your amazing work and then got out. We'll get into the reasons why. The great Jörg Buttgereit, thank you so much for coming on. How are you this morning?
A little bit. I catch the cold this week, but I'm fine now, I think. So I sound more mature today, mature.
I suppose to begin, let's talk about, if you don't mind, let's talk about you grew up in West Berlin, obviously pre-unification, years and years ago, before when it was still kind
Mm.
of there was different territories owned by the Allied forces. Yeah, can you just kind of take us through what it was like growing up in West Berlin?
Well, the funny thing was that in West Berlin, because we were this island in the eastern part of Germany, this western island, you didn't have to go to the military.
Hmm.
So I was born in West Berlin, so for me it was normal. But everybody who didn't want to go to the army in Germany, they came to Berlin, to West Berlin, to stay there to be safe.
Hmm.
So it was a melting pot for runaways, you could say. And I think it's a very natural thing that people who are into arts and stuff like that and against being in the military, they are more artistic. So you had a lot of artists in that melting pot of West Berlin. So it was kind of a unreal yeah unreal place to be, but for me it was normal because I was born there.
Do you think that being in that particular location led to you kind of having the media diet which you had, which is kind of as a kid was kind of mixed in terms of classic American cinema, Japanese cinema? Obviously, Godzilla films have been a kind of preoccupation of your life. Do you think that kind of contributed to you having this mix of stuff from different cultures?
Yeah, I mean, this that well, my love for Japanese monsters simply became because I was going to a cinema very often. I had like 4 cinemas in my district here in Berlin, Schöneberg. And during the 70s, early 70s, late 60s, Japanese monster movies were a big market in Germany.
Hmm.
And I went to kiddie matinees every Saturday and Sunday, and I watched Hammer horror films with Christopher Lee. I watched
Amazing.
all the Universal monster movies on screen. I watched all the Godzilla movies, so that was quite normal. And that, of course, made a big impression on me. And that's one of the reasons why, yeah, sci-fi and horror culture seem to be very normal to me, you know? So in West Berlin, you had the Allied forces, so soldiers were stationed here from the US, and they brought American culture to Germany as well. There was no real interaction with them because they were kind of living in a bubble, the
Uh-huh.
French, the British, and the US forces. But I went to a shop where you can buy used comic books. And some American guy must have loaded off a bunch of American comic books in that used book store. So I went there and I got my first issues of Weird War and Werewolf by Night, all these cool stuff that was not available in
Oh,
Germany.
that's
I couldn't read
awesome.
it because it was in English, but that made my day. I saw, like the Frankenstein monster holding a big swastika and the boys fighting with it. That was something so different to the education you got in history class
So, I
in
mean, one thing
elementary
that your
school.
films have kind of have touched your films touched on, it's interesting to bring that up. One thing that we was especially taboo at the time that you were making films, or there was definitely you were making a kind of transgressive statement by the use of kind of Nazi imagery in
Mhm.
the Todesking, of course, but also Schramm.
And before
Y-
that, I did a film I think in 1982,
Yeah,
Bloody Excesses in the Leader's Bunker.
I've seen
It was
that
more
one.
like a
Yeah.
joke, but that was the first time I played around with a swastika, which was something that was kind of normal in the punk rock context.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I mean,
I went to Britain a lot to buy punk rock music and records and comic books, and I could buy swastika T-shirts in souvenir shops. I was shocked,
of
but
course,
also
I mean, there's the famous image of Sid Vicious with the swastika shirt, but also I know
yeah,
that you were influenced visually on Nekromantik by visuals that you were seeing bands like SPK and Traub and Gristle use when they came
yeah,
through Berlin, but also I mean, they're kind of like ironic, somewhat. I mean, like, I am vastly oversimplifying the complicated ways in which they were using fascist imagery, but that kind of semi-ironic use of fascist iconography was definitely something that was happening with the industrial bands at the time as well. I mean, I'm gonna turn on my camera briefly. I am not the girl with the Todesking tattoo because there's a lot of us, but I am. But I mean, I also have Skinny Puppy right next to it. So the industrial scene is kind of like where I came up. It's kind of like in many ways the basis for what I'm into in terms of music. And then as I've got older and my tastes have varied, I've gotten to different other kind of things. But which is simply to say that obviously, that reappropriation or examination of fascist imagery, very much a concern of kind of industrial music of the time as well, which I know was a huge influence on you.
yeah. I mean, I saw Throbbing Gristle in 1918 here in Berlin, and I was totally puzzled. I had the luck to go backstage and got some badges from Genesis P. Orridge, and
That's amazing.
I was shocked that he was having on this kind of Nazi uniform. It was not a Nazi uniform, it was a fantasy uniform.
Uh-huh.
Uh, it wasn't used like it was normal for people from the subculture to have used military clothes, but the stuff
Yeah,
Sabine
of course.
Gristle was wearing was new. So they
Yeah.
made these uniforms to make you think. That was before Leibach played around with
Hmm.
this imagery and stuff. So they
Well,
always kept you thinking with strange behavior. That was the concept, I think.
I mean, so when you were seeing these kind of like swastikas and stuff on the American comics when you were a kid, was that different to what you would get in German media at the time?
Well, in
Again,
Germany, it was and it is still
and still is of
not
course
allowed
banned.
to use swastikas out of a historical context. And comic books are not a historical context. So if
And
you,
of course, this has led to the, I don't know if it's true, but the urban myth that Kiss had to change their logo for use in Germany. Is that true?
it's true, and
There's a
I
big
know that
Kiss
because
doll
I'm a
behind
big
Jörg.
I'm a big Kiss fan since 1976. And the first records I have is with a round S. I didn't know that they have this flashy S, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Later I found out, and because they had, I think Kiss were getting so big that the German management finally decided to create an own logo in 1980 to because all the artwork on the records were ruined because they just plastered, stupid round S's on logo, which is a piece of art, this Kiss logo, I think. But but they didn't have to change it. They changed it to sell more records, which is one of the main concerns of Kiss, I would say.
Well, yes, I mean records and coffins and toys and all. I think the most mediafied band we would have to say. You got your first Super 8 camera when you for your first with money from your first communion, or you got it for your first communion, yeah?
Yes, my grandpa promised me money if I uh, got this communion, so I did it. I did it for the money to buy a Super 8 camera, which I
That's
did the next day, and then I started filming stuff with my schoolmates mainly.
that's awesome.
That was in 76 or 77, I think.
Do you mind me asking, just checking what age are you, Jörg?
I'm 62 now.
You do
So
not look it. That is the benefits of Berlin living, I guess.
yeah, I was born in 1963. So it's yeah, I'm in a when I was young, people over 60 were grannies, you know.
So I was gonna ask because of the communion, I was gonna ask you weren't raised Catholic then?
No, it's evangelisch, we say. So what's that in English? Protestant or I don't know.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, Protestant. I just find it interesting because when I speak with people from mainland Europe as opposed to Ireland, it's often the case that in Ireland it was very much literally, unfortunately, in the past beat into people. But if people, I think people have a much more kind of casual relationship with it. Often I find in mainland Europe with
Mhm.
religion in general.
Yes, if you go to south of Germany to Bavaria, it's very straight and Catholic. So it differs from part to part of Germany, I think. But anyway, I found out when I traveled with my movies that uh, I don't have more problems in countries like Spain, which is very Catholic, and so they like horror stuff because yeah, it's kind of the same. I think you have to if you have this all these church imagery in your head and this
Oh
upbringing,
yeah.
then you know that a movie like The Exorcist really rocks.
Exactly. I mean, there's a reason why you have such strong a kind of death rock and horror punk and goth communities in Spain, Mexico, a lot of
Yeah.
South America. I think it's because I was raised Catholic. I have not been since I was in my late teens, but I got my video camera for my confirmation. But I think that like yeah, that is the imagery of of Christianity is like the blood of Christ, the crucifixion. Of course, you made a segment of Jesus their film. That imagery feels familiar to us, and also to be honest, I mean sexual perversion. Like I mean, gay sex just doesn't hit the same for me without the faint possibility that Jesus is watching. Which is what I wanted to, so I wanted to ask you because how do you feel about your film's association with the horror genre? Because I know that you always kind of saw them as underground films and existing within that kind of tradition.
Yes, because that's as we just talked about being influenced by movies from Throbbing Gristle and SPK. the movies they screened during the concerts, and being influenced by old horror movies, being influenced by, and being very much influenced by the spirit of John Waters, I would say,
Yeah.
because I saw Flamingos. It was in distribution in Germany in the mid 80s, early 80s, and I saw those films and I it just made click. I said, well, you can simply just do it, and
Hmm.
someone will pick up your film and show it somewhere else on this planet. So maybe I could do the same. But being a horror fan, I had this kind of, Germany had very strict censorship.
Hmm.
And during the, well, you had it in Great Britain as well with the video nasties. So horror films were heavily edited, they were not distributed. Films like The Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre got banned. So there was a need to protest against that.
Hmm.
And that was part of the underground culture that we protested against big record companies, big movie studios. We wanted to do our own things.
The
I saw
notion of
that
selling out
Waters,
was still real.
yes, and I saw that John Waters just didn't care about all that, and he just did a movie with his friends, and that it went worldwide, and I also watched very carefully how Throbbing Gristle distributed their own records, their own
Hmm.
videotapes. They just released everything on their own. And that, when I saw that, I said, okay, if we would be able to do a movie in feature length, we might be able to put it in our in cinemas in Berlin because I was working as a projectionist by then
Hmm.
in a small punk rock cinema. And yeah, then the need of a video release came out. We just founded a video label. So we just did everything on our own. That was a time where you could do it, but it was much, much more difficult than you can imagine to do this because the digital age was not there. You couldn't distribute stuff like this, so it was very slow. So I'm still surprised that my films, yeah, went around all the world even without any help from the digital age that came much later.
It's incredible. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to any of my previous episodes, but I was talking with Fred Vogel, the August Underground and now the
Mhm.
Final Interview director, and we mentioned you because I think one thing that your films have in common with Fred's is that I think that the men in your films, even if they kill people, are kind of insipid, pathetic, to use the parlance of the modern age, beta males. You don't make murder cool at all. And that is something that I feel is in common with Fred's movies. But
Mhm.
we talked about how the lengths, like there's some great documentary features on the Necromantic disc. Before I said, I want to talk about my history with Necromantic, if you don't mind. I so as I mentioned, my friends Nico Wild, they wanted me to say a Jorg to you because they love your work and love you. But also I mentioned the story of like we were already friends, but I went to their flat and I saw that they had copies of the Necromantic box set and the Necromantic Blu-rays that Arrow put out. And it was a moment where like friendship was definitely cemented and I was like, okay, I recognize the level of sicko that this person is at, and I'm intrigued and wish to continue this burgeoning friendship. So like Necromantic has been a huge part of my life. When they showed the films to me, they still feel dangerous and they still feel it, yeah, it felt like something dangerous, and that was kind of why those films were like a gateway for me into the more kind of extreme horror kind of stuff. But think it's amazing that in 2024 when I watched them first, we're talking about,
Wow, that's very late.
yeah, I was 33 when I first watched the Necromantic films, and within a few months had got a tattoo of the Todesking.
But for me, it's kind of really strange. I don't really get it because when I made those films, as I just explained, it was kind of a protest against the censorship movement. It was the punk rock spirit of the 70s and 80s. And these films were necessary, I think, for especially for Germany, because we had these strict censorship movements and horror culture was not existent
Hmm.
in Germany. So when you watch these films today, I really can't see how they relate to. Do they look like something from another world, from another period, or do they have
Yes,
a
100%.
relevance today? That's
I think they
how
do.
come?
Because I think with the Super 8 aspect of Necromantic, one, which is why appreciate all your work, but Necromantic is my favorite of the two films. The Super 8 nature of it, it feels genuinely transgressive. It's funny as hell. It's disgusting as hell. There's just a moment, they're incredibly German. In that, what I find funny as well is reading your book is that like Monica M is still takes part in concerts for Necromantic 2 and stuff. Whereas I don't know if you know about the legacy of Fred's movies, but some people have completely involved in those in the August Underground movies, completely distanced themselves from
Mm,
the work because they don't want to be associated anymore. I think it's funny and it speaks to I think based on someone who went to Berlin once when she was in her when she was 20. So I don't really have the on the ground perspective, but I think based on what I understand of the culture at the time, that just makes more sense that Berliners are going to be more like, yes, I was in this film when I was in my 20s or 30s and I did these extremely transgressive things. Didn't we all? Like that was the
yeah, it's a little bit more complicated. I would think, for example, Beatrice, the main actress from the first Necromantic, she was very unsure for
Mhm.
quite a while what she did in Necromantic, and it needed actually someone else from a festival in Germany who made an homage to her because Beatrice went to do a comedy TV series, very successful cinema comedies where she's in. So she could have been a real star in Germany, but she was too punk rock, I would say. And, but she went mainstream, and she wasn't really sure if Necromantic was something that did something good for her career.
Mhm.
But someone from a festival called in Kassel, the town of Kassel, Ralf Stadler, the festival boss of a festival that I can't. What is the festival called? Anyway, so he made like an homage to Beatrice and screened a lot of movies and kind of forced her to be at a screening of Necromantic, and she got so much positive feedback, like I'm getting today when I do screenings with Necromantic, that she kind of embraced the movie now, but it took quite a while.
Mhm.
And Monica M, for example, the actress from the second Necromantic movie, she always made sure that I only use her pictures from the movie in context of the movie.
Mhm.
Because you could do so many disgusting things with pictures I took on the set of Necromantic
Mhm.
I felt responsible to to make sure that it's not getting in the wrong hands, which is today very, very difficult.
Of course.
But that's something when we license the pictures to different countries, that's one of the reasons why I always check the artworks and stuff like
Yeah,
that,
of
so that it's
course.
not too exploitation like.
Of course. I mean,
Suppose there's exploitation.
even Barbara Crampton still lived with years of people bringing that shot of her getting head from the severed head up to our conventions, and as a woman, that's got to be incredibly strange. And
Yeah.
some men who go to horror festivals, and maybe some women too, because Necromantic, it shows girls can be sickos too. It's a Necromantic 2, well, Necromantic and Necromantic 2. Some men in the horror community can be creepy. A lot of us were weird kids, and some of us dealt with that better going into adulthood than others, I would say.
Mm.
But I think also, for me, if I feel extremely self-indulgent, but I wrote an article called Why Extreme Horror for the Irish website Head Stuff. So I'm in Dublin and some stuff in there that I think kind of explains what the appeal of not just Necromantic, but a bunch of different films. that deal with basically the human body being reduced to just meat and this kind of existential terror of we are just meat. Of we are when we die, we are just going to be something taking up space in the world. And I feel like as a trans person, as a trans woman in particular, I can relate to this feeling of disassociation between myself and my body. And this notion of, I feel for me, what a lot of this kind of extreme content gives is that speaks to that. But also, I think in particular for trans people, there is this fear that after, not a fear, but there is this concern because sometimes, depending on the relationships you can have with your families, you have cases of trans women being buried in suits under the names, like their quote unquote male names. And I think that there is a real existential horror that is particular to trans people of what will happen after we die and if our personhood is going to be respected. So, in a way, for me, Necromantic is like a worst case scenario, but also it's so absurd that that's kind of almost better than the usual kind of disrespect, and there is a degree of love to the treatment. And I have to, whether I include this in the episode or not is we'll see. But it was a little bit sexy to me. I have to be honest as well. Like, so, I mean, how does that kind of? I think that the I don't, feel free to talk as much or as little about, your own sexuality, but you were a man who was around the subculture in Berlin, in West Berlin in the 80s. Nothing would surprise me. Not to imply anything, but nothing would surprise me. But I mean, I'm sure this isn't the first queer reading of the necromantic films because obviously they were coming about during the AIDS crisis. How do you
Actually,
feel about what I've just said?
the funny thing is, and that's something that totally went away from the necromantic myth, is that the first review ever was in a gay magazine from Berlin. And
Hmm.
the headline was that, okay, this is Necromantic is the first movie about AIDS because people are going to bed with death.
Hmm.
And I was totally surprised because
Hmm.
that was nothing I had in mind when I read it. But that first review gave me the idea that I have no control anymore about the content of my movie,
Hmm.
that people can do or read something into it that and that I can't do anything about it, which is a good thing because
Hmm.
to me it's more entertaining to read new interpretations. Because to be honest, I didn't have a master plan behind Necromantic. To me, the first Necromantic is a very childish movie that is spliced together in a way, and you could see that it's a first movie, a
Hmm.
first feature-length movie. I did like 15 short films before, but the cameraman who did the wonderful Super 8 camera on Necromantic, Uwe Bohrer, he was making sure to tell me every second day that this is not gonna be pieced together. Nobody will understand this movie. It's impossible to release it that way.
Hmm.
So it was strange. But being in context with a queer community, well, there was no queer community back in the 80s because that term didn't exist
Hmm.
in West Berlin in the early 80s. But the first screenings of my movies were actually in a gay bar
Hmm.
called Risiko. And the Risiko bar later became a very famous spot where Blixer Bargeld from Einstürzende Neubauten was behind the counter serving you drinks,
Hmm.
and where Nick Cave or Jeffrey Lee Pierce uh, hang out in the kitchen after the concerts. Ellen Vega, they all showed up there. But when it first opened, it was I think in the 70s. It was a lesbian bar,
Hmm.
and it became more. So I had my first two girlfriends. They went to that bar very often, and I
Hmm.
wasn't allowed to go there because I was a man. So I was discriminated. But back then, nobody was really upset about that. I just felt, okay, go to your lesbian place. It's no danger for me, like this.
Hmm.
And so that place became, it used to be called Blocksberg. And Blocksberg is that place where the witches jump on, I don't know when, on that special date. But anyway,
Hmm.
it became the Risiko Club, and it was done by a gay guy and two lesbian girls.
Hmm.
And during that time, I was getting an education as a window decorator, a decoration job. That was but I had to do something after school. So I
Hmm.
didn't, they didn't let me go to a film school. So I went to one of those guys who tell you what you can do with your life. And he told me, well, if you're an artist, you could be a window decorator, which is
Hmm.
totally nonsense. But I got this job in a big warehouse and I met a lot of friends there and found out that like back then 80% of window decorators were gay people. And
Oh, cool.
I had a lot of fun with these guys because they were always pretending to be old housewives and and falling downstairs. It was so funny. So I made my first films with them,
Hmm.
and that was a connection. So they also made movies. They called themselves the Teufelsberg production, and so it were people from my education so gay people that I screened my movies with at the Risiko. That
Hmm.
was so to say my my ticket to get in there, because I was not gay.
Hmm.
But I wasn't, but I was allowed to screen my movies there because I had gay people in my movies. So
Hmm.
it was not that strict, but that's my simple thing then. So and I screened lots of other people's Super 8 movies there. So that was this phase where I saw, nobody really talked about being gay or not. It was just very normal back
Hmm.
then in this island, Berlin.
Hmm.
So West Berlin. So nowadays I'm kind of not ashamed, but how do you say? I'm kind of worrying when people have to explain what they are and stuff, that they feel the need to explain and to stand up for something, which for me seems very normal. But I know, of
Hmm.
course,
Yeah, of
the
course. I mean, it's and in particular in the last year, it's been it's a very hard time, particularly with what's coming from America, but also to a huge degree in the UK. It's a very worrying time to be. I mean, I can speak from my perspective, and I'm very clear
Mhm.
that this is my perspective, especially when it comes to your films, because I'm like other people might have a completely different relationship with them, which I think is beautiful. Yeah, it's a very
But
difficult
it
time
makes
to be. Sorry.
it makes totally sense because if you think that one of my influences was John Waters, who didn't
Hmm.
give a shit about sexual identity,
Hmm.
he just
Well,
embraced.
there's a great book called Corpses, Fools, and Monsters, and it goes through the history of trans, in particular, representation on screen. But the thing that you mentioned, there was no kind of talk of the term queer. But I mean, the thing is that when I look back for examples of trans people in the past, people had an entirely different relationship to labels, and people that
Mhm.
you could now kind of say were like examples of trans people. At the time, they might have had completely different labels and identified as a cross-dresser or, equally identified with being a gay man. But that's the kind of complicated relation at the time, and it's certainly like it's been
But
interesting for me.
it goes much more far back. If
Of
you look
course,
at
yeah.
James Whale and The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, of course.
Any Tim Burton movie wouldn't be possible if he hadn't seen The Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, of
And
course. Yeah.
that's a queer movie, I would say.
Oh yeah, no,
And
no. I think
yeah,
horror is 100% queer. Like I not
yeah,
100%, but I think there is no horror history without the influence of queer people. I think
yeah.
that's a huge part of it. Going back to the kind of insipid male characters, but a preoccupation across your films, from Hot Love to Necromantic, and then to a degree to Shram, is characters being cuckolded. Where do you think that kind of comes up as a fixation for your work?
What's Cook Hold It?
Cuckolded is having their partner, their girlfriend or wife cheat on them or
Ah,
leave
yeah.
them. leave them for another character.
Well, that's in every second movie, right?
Yes, yes.
That's something very well. Actually, Hot Love is made was made at a time where my girlfriend left me, so that
Okay.
was kind of a hot topic for me. And for Necromantic, it just made sense to. I mean, to me, it was simply a triangle love story, but one is dead. So
Yeah.
it had to be a normal plot. Everything that I was doing was weird, because I was afraid the audience wouldn't be able to get attached to the film if I only have these weird people in it, which turned out to be a good thing. But I wasn't sure if that works, because if you only deliver protagonists that are normally supposed the bad guys, then who do you want to identify with? That
Hmm.
was my concern. So I did try to make the stuff we were showing as beautiful as possible. And that's, I think, that was the main idea behind doing the love scenes very kitschy and with all these optical effects, because in the first scenes. But then I thought, well, it's more easy to swallow if you put romantic music on it.
Of
And
course,
that
yeah.
became, I think, the clue to really disturb the people, because you my movie never tells you what you are seeing on screen is something terrible. It tells you it's all normal. Yeah, yeah. It's all normal. Everything is good. The music is nice. Even when he kills himself, romantic music is playing. It's a happy ending. So that was, I think, the real subversive thing that happened in Necromantic. That uh, I I dealt with the stuff on screen as if it's very normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my review of Necromantic, I described the end scene. I fell in love with the movie when his cock starts jisming and then he jisms blood. But in my review, I wrote, people made this and then I watched it and now I'm describing it to you and you have to hear about it. And then I just had a line and I just said, cinema. I think it truly is cinema, you know?
Yeah, hopefully. Well, in a way, it's cinema, but it's also the opposite of cinema, because cinema is has changed. I'm kind of sad that movies like this are not made anymore. Nowadays in the mainstream movies, at least.
I think there are examples. I mean, have you heard of Castration Movie?
No, is it is that a film title?
Yeah, yeah, Castration Movie Anthology is to give it its full title, and there's Castration Movie Anthology 1 Traps and Movie Anthology 2 The Best of Both Worlds. Traps is 4.5 hours long, and Best of Both Worlds is 5 hours long. It began as a two-part film project, and it is now going to be 4 parts. But its title comes from Louise Ward, who made it. She kind of originally started in the extreme horror world, but I know that the title comes from the fact that it's going to involve her obtaining a backstreet orchiectomy, which is a surgery to remove testicles. So the
Hmm.
castration will definitely be a part of the movie at the end, but it's just very lo-fi, shot on a camcorder, trans cinema that is also just like filthy and like just like so darkly hilarious and
It
uh
reminds me of Never Let Me Die a Woman by Doris Wishman,
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
which was a film for a mainstream audience on 42nd Street.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but this is the thing is that for me, for looking for examples in films from the past, it's like these films are by a modern standard not politically correct in terms of how they represent queer or trans people, but it was representation and it was,
Mhm.
you know, it's footage. It's like I recently watched the French film Doberman with my girlfriend, and it's like the character who is the like cross-dresser trans character, whatever. It's people are homophobic and transphobic to her, and the way in which people talk about her is not great at times. But also, she's a member of the gang. She's respected by her friends who are cool enough with people to go to a nightclub that seems to be mostly cross-dressers, and we have a scene where a group of trans women talk about getting a vagina in a film from the 90s. That's rare. And so, regardless of
Mm,
whether the representation is quote unquote positive or not, we got to see ourselves in those films, and that's important.
mm.
Uh,
Yeah,
yes.
Let Me Die a Woman is not a good example,
No,
but
it's
it's an
mentioned.
amazing movie.
It's mentioned in the book I mentioned, Corpses, Fools, and Monsters. I haven't
Yeah.
done it myself, but in London, where I used to live, I'm Irish. I'm from I live in back in Dublin now, but in London, where I used to live, there was a screening series called Tea Girls on Film, and they showed Let Me Die a Woman and the Bob Clark movie, She Man, or what's I can't remember what that one's called.
I don't know,
There's a
but
Bob Clark
I've seen.
one that's like a sexploitation kind of forced feminization one.
I don't know about that one, but I had seen Let Me Die a Woman on a big screen like 2 years ago on a festival in Austria in
Hmm.
Vienna Slash Festival. Have you heard about that
No,
festival?
I haven't.
It's a very good festival with a hidden queer context, I would say, because it's not obvious.
Mm.
But if you, we screened Let Me Die a Woman there, and it was a big hit would be, but the people just took it.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
But you were just talking about some of these movies are not today. I have the feeling that my movies are now political correct, but they were not political correct when they were made. And that's something that's really strange, I think, because
Yeah,
I
that
wasn't doing these films to shock. And I just went to Tokyo to screen um, three of my films, and there were young girls and they were having Todesking tattoos. No, not tattoos, but they're giving me, I have here something. They're giving me presents like this, like the little artworks here with,
that's amazing. That's
yeah,
incredible.
and it's such a strange experience if you go to a totally different country with a totally different cultural background and
Yeah.
people pretend you're doing uplifting movies. It's
Yeah.
really strange.
But I mean,
So, in a way, to me, it's really strange that I get all these positive feedback now because the movies are much more available than they were when they were new, of course.
yeah.
And I had so many bad experiences when seeing the movies or putting them out on VHS, and I had so much trouble with it that it's it's really I don't get it. Why is it okay to do all this stuff now today in a movie? Or is it just because it's old? I don't have a clue.
That's hilarious. I mean,
Yeah,
I have to be honest, Jörg. Like, I can not include this in the episode, but I didn't assume that you were, heterosexual when I watched your films. I assumed you were also queer. So that is, I mean, that is the vibe.
but
Like,
I got the Wolfgang Müller. That's the head of the group Die tödliche Doris,
no,
and
I'm not familiar.
that's the guy who's talking about birds in Necromantic 2 in the
Oh,
black and
okay.
white film on the film.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like this the German spokesman of queer art people from the 80s. And I read an interview with him, and he's talking about me, and he said, I was queer even if I wasn't gay, and and the word queer was not existing at all. I was already queer. So me. So it
So-
doesn't. So you don't have to be gay, I think, to be queer. That's what he
No.
was talking about,
No,
I
for
think.
sure. My girlfriends are fans of the TV show Lex, and of course you directed an episode of that. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about that experience, but also you've also directed into the episodes of Into the Night, that documentary. Was that for Artsy or for Tracks?
Yeah, it was a TV channel Arte, yeah. Hmm?
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
did
used to
some
live in
episodes.
Paris and stuff, so I'm familiar with Arte. But how was that experience of working in television? Because I wondered if, they knew your previous work and if that was ever kind of like there was ever any talk of like we cannot give Jörg Buttgereit this budget to work in TV. But also, I'm always surprised in your stories that the places where you expect to get resistance aren't often the places where you get it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the backstory behind Lex is that I was in Spain at the Sitges Film Festival,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a retrospective with my movies in the
Mm-hmm.
90s already, and late 90s. And the producer of Lex, The Dark Zone, was there, and he was seeing my movies and really liking them. And he was just trying to give me a favor to earn some money, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we get some money from Germany, we get funding from Germany, so I have to spend money in Germany. And he let me kind of produce for a Canadian director one or two episodes here in Berlin because they were shot in Potsdam, a town next to Berlin.
Oh, cool.
So that's how I became involved with Lex and did some professional work. And then the whole team moved over to Halifax in Canada, and that's where he asked me to direct an episode for him,
Mm-hmm.
just to be kind. And I mean, the script was ready. I couldn't do a lot of harm, but because I was so used to work with restricted, with limitations, no money and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I was very, I would say, effective in shooting the episode. I only shot the stuff I needed. But
Mm-hmm.
I was not the editor, of course, of the episode. That were different people. And they complained that I'm not doing enough coverage for a TV series. So when I was back in Berlin, the producer phoned me and said, "Well, you want to do some more of these things, but then you have to come back and reshoot stuff of your own." Then I told him I did it the way I like to. I
Uh-huh.
know I'm a spoiled artist, but it's not fun to reshoot stuff of your movie if you don't think it is necessary. So
Mm-hmm.
I told him my show producer had to do it on his own, and yeah, I kind of quit the job because it was in an artistic way not satisfying at all.
Mm-hmm.
But he was not the producer. He was not angry. He could understand it, and he said, "Well enough. Well, you earned some money with it. We had fun.
Mm-hmm.
See you soon in Berlin." And I was in contact with him for quite a while. So it was a professional thing, but it wasn't really in an artistic sense. It was not very satisfying to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And Into the Night, Durch die Nacht mit, was a different thing. I was one of the stars of Into the Night in one episode. So they asked me to be in it together with Bruce LaBruce. I
Oh, of
think
course.
have you never seen that?
I haven't seen your episode, no, but I know of Bruce LaBruce.
Yeah, yeah.
Of
So
course.
that was so I was in Canada with Bruce LaBruce, and we had this show, and it went very well, and I got connected with a director who did the episode with me, and he was also a producer of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And he just asked me, because they were doing a lot of shows, if I have ideas for shows. And I said, well, I'm a big fan of Joe Coleman. Maybe we can do an episode with him. And then he said, okay, we try with Arte. And then Arte came back and said, well, yeah, Joe Coleman is cool, but there needs to be some sexy thing in it as well. And then I did know that Joe Coleman knows Asia Argento, and I did know Dario Argento from a festival once, but I wasn't able to contact him, and it was in a phase where he was not very close to his daughter, I think.
Uh-huh.
So Joe Coleman kind of got Asia Argento for me, and then we did that episode with Joe Coleman and Asia Argento in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was already the second episode I directed. I directed three episodes, and I was starring in one episode.
Didn't you suggest Ace Frehley is who you would like to get on the episode, which was blue sky
These guys,
thinking?
these guys, they don't get it. That's the problem. To explain something like Into the Night to a rock star is kind of impossible. They always think it's an interview. We, I was very close of doing an episode with Lemmy from Motorhead,
Oh, that would be
but we managed.
amazing.
Yeah, but we already had planned like a yeah, we already had planned like a ride in the Wonder Wheel in
Hmm.
London and a screening of my short film Mein Puppy. I wanted
Hmm.
to show Mein Puppy to Lemmy and talk about him. Have you seen the film about my father?
Yes, Mein Papi. It's a great
Yeah.
film.
So that was plan of the thing, but even like after weeks of doing preparations for that episode, Lemmy wasn't still getting that we had to spend like 6 or 8 hours, and that we were driving around. It was just too complicated. I don't know if it was him who didn't get it or if it was his management. It's very hard to
Okay.
say. Normally, the episodes are much better when you deal with the persons directly.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
people like Freely or Lemmy, you can't deal with them directly, so it's no use in the end. It's very seldom that that something like this happened. I think the very first episode of Into the Night, also done by Hasko Baumann, who directed the episode with me and Bruce LaBruce as well. The very first episode was with John Carpenter. That was
Mm.
something that couldn't happen today, I think, like having John Carpenter for 6 to 8 hours on camera, it's impossible. You do a 1 hour movie out of it. And to coming back to your question, of course, was a very nice experience to follow Joe Coleman and Asia Argento. So when you deal with people like this, it's very complicated. But yeah, John Carpenter, he was willing to do it, and he like a whole day or a whole night with Franka Potente, that German actress,
From
and
Lola
it's
Rent.
very nice. It's a very nice episode, and that's something that wouldn't be able today, I think. And the series is not existing anymore.
I think I've seen most of your work that's on film. I haven't seen your section for German angst, and I haven't
Ah, yeah.
seen some of the films plays. The only one I've seen is Captain Berlin, but I've seen like all your music videos. But it's funny that you mentioned Lemmy because in my head I was just starting to play Lemmy. I'm a feminist, but I love you. What was the name of the band that you did that promo for?
Haskell.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, so like, is it strange we talk about the challenges that you had with putting out Necromantic? I mean, the legendary Scala screening, and then, of course, the kind of like the most pirated film ever.
Right. Yes.
You thought at one stage. Um, but I talked with Fred as well about how funny it is that I know that you didn't even try to get Necromantic past the BBFC because there wasn't a snowball's chance in hell during the video
Yeah, but
nasties
that's
era.
because we were always trying to avoid any kind of authorities.
Mhm.
Why in hell should I get a certification from someone else? I know what I did and I want to put it out. I
Mhm.
don't need these excuses. That's the same that happened in Germany. We didn't apply it to the certification board because we wanted to bring it straight to the people. But that's something, of course, that can backfire.
Of course, I think it's the commercial realities of the film world, unfortunately, just mean that sometimes in order to distribute your films at a wider level, you'll have to engage with the censorship boards. I know that Der Todesking, you did manage to get a release with the BBFC. Um,
Yeah, that was done by Headpress, by that by that publisher. They asked me if they can release it, and then they applied it to the BBFC. I wasn't yeah I wasn't too keen about applying it to the BBFC, but Headpress did want to put it out, and so they did it.
of course, yeah. I mean, so how does it feel? Because now it's funny for me. I came from a perspective where the first time I watched Necromantic was on Blu-ray. How does it feel? It's strange that now, these films, your film Necromantic 2 was seized by the German authorities. And now I can go on to Tower Records or the HMV here and get a really gorgeous box set of it of your films, which I have the Memento Mori box set, which is a work of art that anyone should get here in front of me. But how does it feel then to have, to now you can buy your films through Tower Records, you can buy them. How is that for you? That must be, quite a contrast from what it used to be and the lengths that people used to have to go to try and get these films.
Yes, the satisfying thing is that the movies are still the same, so they are not
Mm,
censored. They are just released as they are supposed to be. Uh, but for me, the most satisfying thing is that if you watched the film just 1 or 2 years ago, you really could understand the dialogue. You really could see a
yeah.
picture in focus, and that was something the people who saw it for the first time never experienced, because
No.
all these crappy 60 millimeter screenings or Super 8 screenings in big cinemas, they didn't look very good. And the sound was like this. You know, it
I
was
think
magnetic sound from a 60 millimeter print. It was a mono sound. It was all very terrible. And that was something that was really frustrating to me.
I
I
think
even
that the
had to, after 10 years, I finally made a 35 millimeter blow up print of Nekromantik after 10 years because big festivals came and wanted to screen the film, and I couldn't deliver a real film print. So I had to spend like 10,000 euros to make a blow up to be able to screen the film on bigger festivals.
and this was before obviously this was this before like DCPs where there was no
Yes, of
screening
course.
of
Yeah, 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 yeah. 10 years
um
after was like the 90s, late 90s. Yeah, no digital projection, no. Yeah, today it's easy. You can go with one disc of your box set and screen it in the cinema, and it would look great.
of course, yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of the urban myths that developed around necromantic that you used real human body parts, which is a practice that happens in Hollywood films more than people would think. But the rumors that there was real human bodies, I think a lot of it developed because people couldn't see the fucking thing when they were
Yeah,
watching
that's true.
it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because when you made bootleg copies, S tapes, they were getting worse and worse, and in the end, I mean, I remember watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the first time in black and white with no sound, filmed from a screen in the US. I didn't saw and I didn't understand anything. And if you watch Necromantic like this, it could be anything. It could be the real thing. Who knows what those Germans do? I don't know. But of course, it helps a lot that the quality was so bad for the myth of Necromantic, of course.
Hmm.
But for me, it was not very satisfying because when you do films, you have images in your head, and when the film is ready, you see, okay, you're not quite to the images you had in your head. You really didn't successfully did what you wanted to do, but then at least you want to put it on screen like you have it in your home and
Hmm.
or on your editing table. But then it gets worse, because when you only have Super 8 or 60 millimeter and you have big cinemas, which
Hmm.
were really necessary because there were really a lot of people showing up for my movies in the 80s and 90s. Then yeah, we had to go to bigger cinemas, and I remember the premiere of Necromantic, even the premiere of Hot Love, were in West Berlin in a cinema with 300 seats, and 500 people showed up. So it was crowded, the expectations were really high, and then you get this crappy screening going on. So it was embarrassing in a way.
Hmm.
It didn't hurt the movie, but with the Scala, it was the same. The Scala screening, Shock Around the Clock, it was in 88 as well, I think, in 1988. Necromantic was the last movie of 12 movies. So I think
Hmm.
that it started in the morning at 7 or 8. And all the
Hmm.
films before were beautifully screened 35 millimeter copies. So real normal cinema prints. And we
Hmm.
came with a self-made 60 millimeter, yeah, film, and with German dialogue and unreadable self-made subtitles. that
So
was
in
the
ter-
frustrating reality of an independent filmmaker. And so I'm very happy that it's easy now to watch the films as I intended them.
I think definitely as well, there is a reception where these films are being treated, critically, intellectually as art. And I think that's the way that, that's what the German courts decided your films were. So who am I to argue? Like, I think you are an artist as decided by the courts. You decided to stop kind of you lost interest in continuing to make feature films, independent feature films after Shram. Can you kind of talk us through that process? Because I was listening to an episode of the podcast Kelly's Taboo Terrors the other day with Eric. I can't remember his name. He's French Canadian. He did Thanatomorphose and The Thing in the Lake,
Yeah,
and he spoke
yeah.
about kind of talking to you and his thesis on you. But he was kind of like considering, they were talking about the realities of trying to continue to make independent art in particular, but the kind of like stain that having done transgressive work can have on your career, and Fred talked about this on the last episode with, nearly getting money for a major project. And then the people involved decide to look him up, and the main thing they see is August Underground, and they're like, he's not fucking doing that. So yeah, is was that a part of why making movies got increasingly difficult for you? Do you think, or do you think that was just yeah? If you can tell me kind of your process behind that.
I think it was a combination of a lot of factors that made me stop doing films after Schramm.
Mm-hmm.
During the production of Schramm, we had the court case with Nekromantik 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we won that case after a period of nearly 2 years in court. So we
Mm-hmm.
won it, and my films were back. So I really made my statement that I can do my movies without getting permission from anybody. And yeah, they even called me an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So my mission was accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering Gristle, they kind of terminated the mission after a few years, sending all the fans a postcard. The mission is terminated, because
Mm-hmm.
and they went on. So that was one reason, I think, that I didn't had anything more to prove.
Mm-hmm.
And Schramm was getting me to bigger festivals, so I went to get in contact to meet people I appreciated,
Mm-hmm.
um, filmmakers, and I got contacts, and so it would have I would have been able maybe to make more films like that, but
Mm-hmm.
my producer Manfred Jelinski, he moved away from Berlin as well, so editing of Schramm was taking very long because I had to go to a different place all the time, so it was
Mm-hmm.
getting more complicated. And the fact that I was still working on film was so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was doing films on videotape, and I hated the video aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it was like, if I have to do a film on video, I don't want to do it. Then I either don't do a movie at all because it will look like shit.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things,
You were you were like Burt Reynolds in Boogie Nights, if you've seen that film.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's true,
Yeah.
because I mean, if you saw some of my music videos, music clips I did, they are all done on Super 8 or 16
Yeah.
millimeter. I never shot this stuff on video. I only started being on when even Lex was done on film stock.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I started doing Into the Night and my documentaries, Monsterland and Monster Island. Did those about Japanese monster movies. I did those, of course, with professional TV equipment. That was and a show like Into the Night would not be possible to do it on film stock because you needed 2 or 3 cameras at once and
Mm-hmm.
then record like 6 or 8 hours, and it's impossible to pay for film stock. And so it made sense to do these on, yeah, digitally. That wasn't even video. So I waited so long, videotape came out of fashion. So that's, I think, 3 reasons at least why I stopped. And yeah, I simply kind of lost interest in a way because the mission was done.
Completed.
And I came back to I mean I got offers very often to be in an anthology movie and stuff like this, but there was no purpose for me to do this. I've
Hmm.
done 4 feature films on my own. Why should I do a short film for an anthology? There's no real reason for me to do
Hmm.
that. No excitement. And being part of German Angst was in the first place mainly a favor to Andreas Marschall, who came up with a project. He was the guy who painted the exploitation movie posters for Nekromantik and Nekromantik 2. And of
Gorgeous
course, back
posters.
then, he wasn't really paid to do the job. So when he came to me and said, when your name is on German Angst, we might get um, more people from for crowdfunding. And that's why I said, okay, I will do something, but um, I think I managed to do a movie that in German Angst, my episode, which is called Final Girl,
Hmm.
it's something that fits right after Schramm. It's really
Hmm.
funny that I was able to go back to these days working, but I made sure to include certain things, working with non-actors, doing it in a very small space, stuff like this.
Hmm.
So I was, yeah, trying to get to give me the same conditions I used to work when I was younger.
I mean, it's funny that that kind of mission accomplished attitude that you mentioned of like Trobin Gristle. That's also very of like the KLF. Their whole
Yeah,
kind of get in situation is kind of but like results focused kind of perspective on art.
and
Um,
to be honest, when after a while, it if I do a movie now, like people asking me when I will do Necromantic 3. I mean, there's nothing you can win with something like
mhm.
Necromantic 3. I don't want to spoil the old movies. If you,
Necromantic Tree exists as well. It's the comic.
it's a comic, yeah,
Like that's the
that's
way
true.
I feel
And
about it.
that's a
And
very clear comic as well.
yes, I was reading it again this morning, being like, it has a trans guy in it. Like it, that
Yeah,
is a part of it.
yeah.
I was like, wow, the queer thing, pardon the pun, continues to hit me in the face because it's just there in the text of your work, like 100%, you know? But it's funny even thinking about, the AIDS allegory aspect of Necromantic or the way that people kind of saw it as the first movie about AIDS. It has the moment where she puts the condom on over the pipe that has been
Yeah.
become the kind of makeshift phallus. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Which was a spontaneous idea by Bea because she said, "Well, he is not he's not getting a hard one." And then we got this broomstick, and then we thought, "Well, that's too gross. It has to be softer." And then we took this condom,
yeah.
not thinking about the meaning of condoms in the age of AIDS.
It was just thinking not getting splinters in her pussy kind of thing.
That's it. That's it. A very practical, pragmatic solution.
But I think that's the beauty of art is that it goes out there, like you said, like it, argue. I mean, not to take your kind of ownership away, but the films don't belong to you. They don't belong.
Yeah.
Films don't belong to their creator anymore, and I think
And
it's interesting.
the funny thing is that the way of working with limitations and with spontaneous ideas and stuff, that's not something that's normally happening on when you make films on a professional level.
Hmm.
So that's something I totally missed when I did Lex, for example.
Hmm.
But I found that in working for the stage because when you work with actors on a stage and they do something in front of you,
Hmm.
it's so yeah, there are so many spontaneous things that happen that it's really fun again.
Yeah.
It's not doing something you read on a script, but doing something in front of you and pretending, and very old-fashioned concept, but I did quite a few stage plays. Yeah, it was really fun doing this because it's such an old-fashioned, thing, and I was able to work with real actors, which is something that was a new experience to me. So I could write a stage play, and people would actually memorize every
Yeah.
fucking stupid sentence I wrote, and they give it to you like it's art.
Well, I mean, it all is art. One thing I wanted to ask about, we were recording for a bit, is I just want to ask about. I think it's interesting now that we have even more of a kind of a serial killer culture. And obviously, I mean, in Hot Love, you wear the Charles Manson t-shirt, which was a Psychic TV t-shirt. So this kind of
Mhm.
imagery was again being used and kind of percolating in the kind of subcultures. But then to Shram opening with the quote. Am I pronouncing Shram right, by the way? I might forget.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, but Shram opening with a quote from Karl Panzram. And by the way, you kind of mentioned that you're short for German angst, that Schramm siegs perfectly into it because I think Schramm also siegs perfectly into Robert Morgan's Tomorrow I Will Be Dirt because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
short
that's amazing.
beautiful. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Um, but yeah, what was your kind of, and then you have like the Charles Manson picture on the wall in the couple's flat in Nekromantik. Like, what was your fascination with kind of serial killer culture? And you've continued that through a moment of silence at the grave of Ed Gein and doing your Ed Gein play and things like that. Like, what for you was the fascination with kind of serial killers and with serial killer culture, for want of a better word?
I mean, I think Ed Gein was one of the inspirations for the first Necromantic because
Hmm.
back then there was a an American book by Judge Golmar about Edward Gein, and my assistant director Franz Rodenkirchen, he had this book, and it had pictures in it, and I wasn't able to read it then, but I wrote it later. So I
Hmm.
was totally fascinated by the Edward Gein case.
Hmm.
And yeah, as you told it, I did a radio play on it. I did a short film at the grave of Ed Gein, and I did out of the radio play, I did a stage play later. I think part of the stage play is on one of the discs, maybe. Oh, no, on the German Blu-ray disc of Necromantic, you have the Edward Gein. You have like 20 minutes from my Edward Gein play,
Hmm.
but it's only on the German edition, I think.
I know there's like a compilation of kind of your stage work, and I think it's called like Monsters of German Art House or something like that. But
Monsters of Art House. Yeah, yeah. But
yeah.
that's three stage plays. That's right. That's actually my stage play version of The Amazing Transplant by Doris Wishman called Sex Monster. That's on that stage.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's on that disc. And there is one called Video Nasty, which is mainly a reading, uh, like an Italian horror zombie movie which stars Lars Eidinger. He's a really big, yeah, actor right now. I mean, he's in the new George Clooney movie on Netflix.
Okay, cool.
And the other one is, yeah, Green Frankenstein. That's also on that disc. And that's my stage play version of one of the Gargantuas, the Japanese. You can see that I always choose impossible topics to put on stage. How can you
Mhm.
do a Japanese monster movie on stage? You can't, and that's the beauty
Yeah.
of failing on the stage.
Yeah.
That's the concept. The same with the Captain Berlin stage play. That's something I enjoyed. That was one, I think, my second work on the stage after the
Mhm.
Ramones musical.
But
But I know that outside of Germany, I'm more known for my films, of course, but over here I'm more known for my Captain Berlin comic books and my radio plays, because that's strictly in German language, so nobody outside of Germany knows that. But if you go to a comic store or even to a newsstand on a main station, you can find my comics. And it says Jörg Buttgereit's Captain Berlin, and
mhm.
it looks like mainstream, but it's still the same. It's me writing. It's one of the artists I work with doing it, and then a one-man publishing house called Weißblech Comics putting it out. It's pretty much the same structure like it was when we did our own videotapes. It's mainly a handful of people working with me, and yeah, and doing handshake deals.
Did you did you ever have, the option or the invitation to be part of you know, the more mainstream kind of like method of production where it's like your stuff ends up mass produced, but was that ever an option for you? Because it's obvious you would not be interested in it, but were you ever kind of approached in any medium to kind of take part in that? And
I mean, to me, this kind of happens with the necromantic movies,
hmm
because if you can get this box set, the Memento Mori box set, everywhere, and I mean, we sold the rights to Arrow to Great Britain and to the US, but
hmm
to be honest, you can order it from all of the
Of
world,
course,
of course,
yeah.
So it's there, and what, yeah, more main, you can't go more mainstream,
hmm
when it's sold out, then it is sold out, but then they will do another edition, it's what, or what were you thinking of with your
No, but
question?
in terms of did you have, offers to work on more mainstream films, more, like to kind of take part in work that would be compromised in terms of the involvement of other financial interests, of other, studio interests? Like, was that ever something that was kind of dangled in front of your face?
I mean,
Uh,
the what happened was that I got in the, oh God, in the, yeah, like 20 or 25 years ago, I started to do my first radio play called Sexy Sushi, which was mainly a film script I did, which were released. So I did that on for nationwide radio. So that was mainstream because
mhm,
the radio plays I did, and I did like 15, I think, were
mhm.
mainly the same topics I used to on when I did films. Stuff about Doris Wishman, about Kim Jong-il and his weird film enthusiasm and stuff like this. So I made these radio plays for nationwide radio, and were available nationwide. Now you can listen to them, to some of them. Did something about Charles Manson as well, and I had very good actors. So that's real mainstream.
hmm
But they asked me to do it because I am Jörg Buttgereit.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it was sometimes they had to erase stuff. I remember that I had to erase certain sentences from my Ed Gein radio play.
hmm
But that was the only thing that ever happened. And that was mainstream. I did it for quite some while, and the structures changed there now. So I stopped doing it because I wasn't able to work with one or two uh, people from the radio who could greenlight that for me.
hmm
Nowadays, they would have to decide if they do the radio play like 10 people, like
Yeah,
a
by
jury
committee.
actually. And I'm too old for getting complaints from a jury about the stuff I want to do. I'm just too old
Okay.
to do compromises. I'm
Yeah,
too
yeah.
stale, I think. And then, of course, I had offers to do film versions of Captain Berlin. But
hmm
then what happens all the time is that they only want to buy my concepts, they want to
And
buy
not
the
work with
plot
you.
from my comic books, and then they want to have a young director who does it.
hmm
And when I'm giving away something I created, I want to have at least a little bit of control. So
hmm
never really happened because on the way of doing these projects I got unhappy, and I since now was always able to pull the plug.
Fair play. I mean, I would say either you'd want some element of creative control or like 20 million. But maybe
Yeah,
you're more principled than I. Like if you're gonna lose your baby, you may as well get a fucking lot of money out of it, I would say. But
yeah, yeah. Yeah, but
um
but I'm not starving. I don't have a car. I don't have kids, so I don't need 20 million.
well, exactly. I mean, who really needs 20 million? But I guess my
Yeah,
feeling would be if a major corporation wanted my work, I'd be like, you have the deep pockets, my friend. I could do all these things, you know what I mean? I could never have to worry again. I'd be like, but I don't think anyone's gonna buy this podcast for that much. You're and fuck it. I'm happy to be. I proudly, boast on my podcast that it's a on the description that it's 100% queer owned independent podcast, which is why thank you. It means a lot.
When you put it online, you have to send me a link.
Oh, of course I will.
I might be able to share it on Facebook,
Oh, thank
but
you.
Facebook is giving me a hard time in the
I
moment.
saw you're in Facebook jail.
Yeah, they are blocking me.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Jörg.
I'm getting a sore throat now again.
No worries. I could talk to you all day. It's been an absolute pleasure. But okay, great. Thank you so
Cool.
much, Jörg.